All right, y'all. So I'm here in the studio, joined by my good friends Monique Murphy, the Murph Khalifa. Is that what you guys go by? Like Murph Khalifa. Okay, I can't even say that all together. Smurfs. And my man Ryan Jessen is in the building, and I need to go ahead and get a shirt just like that one because I see that there's more to the collection.
There's more.
There's more to the collection.
Colors, yeah.
Yes. And of course, Jason Henry. Jason, and you know what? Here's the thing about it, Jason. Now that I got you here in the booth, for the first time ever, we can make this. We can settle this right now. Okay. I want you to give us 8 bars to kick this off. And depending on whether or not those bars are good enough, if they rank, I might come back. If they're good enough, I was like, you know what, I'll surrender. So here we go. All right, drop it on a dime. Like go. Here we go.
Wow.
God created humans, but first He created the universe. He didn't create the concept of white and black. We were just humans created on earth. Racism is a trick, another means of division. A distraction from the life we're supposed to be living. But I'm bringing back the office of poet, so stoic, one that predates the sophist, so respected, one that predates comedic rhetoric. It's words spoken like God in the garden calling, where are you? Hoping. But at the same time, He's knowing Adam had fallen to the grossest. But in spite of Adamic damage, dog, this is my moment. And these bars are just pink slips, the proof that I own it. A form of expression, emotional exits. No longer do I bottle the pain, because I got Jesus peace inside, like I swallowed my chain. I'm dark as the nighttime, but letting my light shine, perfecting precise lines. But sometimes the connotation is abominated. False interpretations are nominated, and it's unsafe when you're open without the combination. Yes.
Let me tell you something right now. Okay, right now, hands down. I was gonna go, because all my life I've been my own favorite MC, but then I met you and you have taken the crown. You're better than Jay-Z. You're better than all of them. You're my favorite. You're my favorite MC, man. It's on record. Y'all have heard it right here.
To God's ears.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. For all to hear. Like, cancel all your other favorite rappers, poets, spoken word people. Jason Henry is the real deal.
Thank you, my bro.
Truth.
Thank you, brother.
And here's the thing about it. People never honor a prophet in their own house, but in this house, we honor you. You're the bomb.
That's good.
Thank you, man.
That's good.
Really
Ryan's
good.
turn.
Really good. Ryan's turn. Yeah, what you got, Ryan?
So I'm ready for the word. We're good.
It's like
Can't follow that up.
God is a better MC than all
I'm
of
the
you.
hype man, not the one. No. I'll just be a hype man.
Man, so we've started the series, When Will It Stop? And of course, this was planned way before everything that's happened around the world has happened. And it's amazing how God plans to have a word that is in season, that can give us hope and encouragement and perspective as to how we look towards the future. And so over the last few weeks, we've touched on Ruth, and a few days ago, we dropped a little bit of the intro around this topic. But today we're going to move on and close out Ruth chapter 1 in discussing all this. And so in what's happening in this story is that whenever we talk about Ruth, a lot of times people will look at the book of Ruth in the sense of the romance between Ruth and Boaz. Sure. Of course, that's a main part of the plot. It's a very important part of the plot. However, what's central to the story is the fact that if it wasn't for Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, you'd never find out about Ruth. Ruth would be there would be no children named Ruth today.
Yeah.
You would never hear about her. Ruth's redemption is built on the back of brokenness and bitterness, on the back of bad news that goes from bad news to worse news to straight up, I can't even say the word, but it goes from bad news to worse news to even worse news. It gets worse progressively as the chapter goes. In Ruth chapter 1, it opens up. Naomi is married to her husband Elimelech. They have 2 sons. They live in the suburbs of Bethlehem. Life is good. And then a famine hits. That's what the Bible describes it as, a famine. It is a recession of recession. It is a depression of depressions. Things are bad. First, the thing about when things hit, when bad news starts to go in the news cycle, at first it's bad, and then it's like, oh, there's only so many jobs that are lost. And then the next week it's like, oh, we've lost 13 million jobs. And the next week it's like everybody's unemployed. Right? Everyone's on unemployment. And then, perhaps back then they had stimulus. No, they didn't have stimulus checks. But let's just say that they ran out of stimulus money. Yeah. It was that bad that Elimelech makes a decision to move his family from Bethlehem, the place where God had placed them, the place of God's provision, and go to Moab, a place where God had rejected and said, do not ever go and be in this place. So they go to Moab, and when they get to Moab, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, dies. And they remain there, and 10 years later, her 2 sons both die. And they're married, but they die, and they leave 2 widows. And so after 10 years of just tragedy after tragedy, they now are faced with hearing news that God has visited Bethlehem once again, that he has visited the people of Israel again, and there's bread in Bethlehem once again. And so Naomi makes a decision to go back, to return. The word that's used there is the Hebrew word shub, which is the same word for repent. She returns. She changes her mindset to go back to the place of God. And as she's starting to go back, her 2 widowed in-laws, her daughter-in-laws are like, we're going to go with you. And she's like, nah, don't go with me. Don't go with me. You guys have to stay back here. Stay back. Orpah decides to stay back, but Ruth decides to cling to her, saying, I am going to cling to your God. Where you die, I'm going to die. Where you're buried, I'm going to be buried. Everything about you, I'm aligning my life with your life. And so despite the nightmare that the story begins with, we start seeing a piece of hope in that God has visited his people again, and now she returns and starts going back. So my first idea that I want us to kind of talk around is that given enough time, God will always take you from wrecked to recovery. Given enough time, God will always take you from wrecked to recovery. He never puts a period on your pain. Yeah, it's always going to be a process that you go through, but there's always a purpose on the other side. Sometimes we don't want to wait long enough to discover what that purpose is. Yeah. So given enough time, God will take you from wrecked to recovery. Our problem is that we have a wait problem. Yeah. Right? Not that kind of wait, but we have a WAIT problem. We do not like to wait. And so my first, question I want to throw out to you guys is that, where have you seen in your life where you are so anxious about what would happen next that you could not anticipate God and wait on him?
Probably this last 3 years of my life. This last 3 years have been probably the hardest years of my wife and myself's life. And there's been a lot of anxiousness, and then a lot of depression and sadness that stems from that anxiousness, and like just it coming to a pinnacle, but then that recovery not coming, but you are anxious, so then you get depressed.
Right.
And I would say just after 3 years, we're finally getting to that place of recovery. We're finally getting to that place where I can have a smile and it's truth behind the smile, rather than the smile being a disguise, the smile being a COVID mask. Right. It's a scripture in Proverbs that says, even in laughter, the heart may aches. And that was us. And we're getting to this place of recovery, but we definitely know what it's like to be in a place where you absolutely have no hope. You have no encouragement. And every day is like, and I would say this for me. My wife will say, that ain't me, that was you.
Right.
But a place to where it's just like, why am I even still alive?
Right.
And that's just me being transparent in this moment.
Right.
But yeah, that's where we are, and that's where we are coming out of at this place of recovery.
Yeah. It's always like interesting how like when you're anxious, that anxiety never leads to a place of joy. No. It always leads to more depression, and you go further, But the flip of anxiety or being anxious is anticipating that God's going to turn something around, and that always puts you in the frame of like, okay, where's the joy coming? Where's the hope coming? Where's the encouragement coming? So I totally understand that when you can get stuck in that cycle of just like, here's another thing, here's another thing, and that's what Naomi's family was dealing with.
Yeah.
It's It's like we left Bethlehem, and here's they're waiting for the other shoe to drop in their circumstances. So.
I thought about the whole, like, the waiting through to try and reach some other side. I think too often part of the difficulty that I have is that my personal timeline of what I declare to be achievement and to be a wholeness is vastly different than where God sees me to be. And so, you sort of go through this character boot camp, I kind of call it, right, when I'm studying a lot of these prophets and men in the Bible, and you go through this sort of boot camp, and I believe, because it's such a difference for me, that I'm at an arrived point. But in God's eyes, what is actually needed in my heart and my whatever is needed for the mission he has here is far beyond. Yeah. So you sit in this moment of feeling that I've actually achieved something, or I've arrived, or I'm at a point of I'm done, right? Like I'm done going through this.
Right.
And God says, well, there's still this gap of character. There's still this gap of faith. There's still this gap of purpose that I need you to get through, because that end point is far beyond where you even believe you are. Right. And so I think that resonates with this and with me for sure, as I get impatient believing that somehow I'm ready for something. Yeah. Or ready to do something, or ready to fulfill a bigger purpose. Yeah. But it's not actually real, because God's true end point of where I should be is different than where I am. Right. Yeah. And so I think when they leave and come back and they're going through the story in Ruth, it's similar to that, right? They're declaring their own timeline versus what God's true vision is.
So like one thing that we see throughout Scripture in the narrative of how God works with humanity is that he's constantly in the business of trading beauty for ashes. He's constantly reconstructing and building upon what has been broken. Like, it's almost his pattern of how he works with humanity. He takes someone and they feel as if they're fine, and then they get broken, and then he blesses them in that brokenness. Yeah. And then he's able to take that individual and then give that person to the world to be used by him. Mm-hmm. So, definitely given enough time, God will take you from a place of being wrecked to recovery. And Naomi has lost everything. She's lost her husband. She's lost her 2 sons. But here she's returning back to Bethlehem. And I just want to read Ruth 1 verse 19 to kind of give us where we're at. So they both went until they came to Bethlehem. And when they had come to Bethlehem, all the city was stirred because of them. Mm-hmm. So, and it's very interesting here. I think you guys can resonate with this. Everybody's excited for you.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, the whole town is, it literally says everyone was stirred. In the original language, it's a, what's that? You know about, you're a wordsmith, onomatopoeia. Is that? It's an onomatopoeia in the original language. Mm-hmm. They said there was a hummum. The Hebrew word is hummum. There was a hummum about her. Yeah. There was a buzz going about the city of Bethlehem about Naomi returning. And so what happens is this, that all the city stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" Mm-hmm. And she said to them, "Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me." Mm. They're excited about her return. Yeah. There's a buzz. There's a hum in the city about what's happening in Naomi's life. So like, Monique, where have you been in a situation where everyone else is excited about what God's doing for you, but you're just kind of like, man.
That has probably happened more often than not, actually. I think because I hold back a lot, and I think a lot of people around me see. Larisha's a good example. Yeah. She will be so excited, and she's like, "Mo, I'm excited for you," and this and that, and I'm like, and then I see it later. But so many times I have just kind of downplayed what God's doing, maybe out of the fear that it's not gonna work out, how I want it to or something. But I even Ryan, like even thinking of that situation, so many like I don't know if I'm a buzzkill or which I probably am, but he gets so hyped about so many things, and I'm like, calm down, like just chill a little
Restrain
bit.
yourself.
Yeah, I'm very unemotional, I guess, about a lot of things. So, and oh man, even saying it out loud, it's probably not good. But he gets excited, and I'm just, I'm like, whatever. Cookies, his stuff he's doing now, like his job and
Yeah.
all of it. I'm just, I'm like, it'll work out.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of emotion about a lot of things.
Do you think that comes from like, you know, the disappointments that you've seen in life? And so like, you know, I know Jason and I have talked about this too in the past. Like, you know, I just want to be realistic.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
Totally.
it's easier for us to be realistic than to trust that God's doing something new.
Yeah. I probably, especially with Ryan even tells me, my standards are so high that I'm always disappointed in people. And I think that you probably got it right to where I don't want to be disappointed in life. So I'm just like, I probably won't hold it to a higher standard. Whatever happens is going to happen. And if it does, it does. And if it doesn't, I'm still alive.
Yeah.
Like, whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I have that about a lot of things, like anything, even cooking. If it's good, it's good. If not, oh well, at least we ate. Whatever.
And the rest of us are like, this is the best thing ever.
Totally.
You know, when are we going to open up the storefront?
Yeah,
Right?
it's true.
Right. We do that. And here's what's happening. God is setting up a comeback in the story. He's setting up a comeback. She's back home.
Yeah.
She's right where she belongs. She's in the place of God's provision. It's time for her to heal. It's time for her to go to the next chapter. But what she's describing is not the next chapter. She's still stuck in the past chapter. Yeah. The past chapter is informing her present more than what God is currently trying to move her towards. She's in the place where God's like, it's like, I want you guys to like, you know, even like picture this. God's like, turn the page and is like, I'm ready to write the new part of the story. This is the part I've been waiting for the last 10 years, all your life. This is the part where everything shifts over to a new narrative, not just for you, because the things that like, and we have to oftentimes understand that, and this is where we need to be like really real. Okay. This is going to sound so unorthodox, but your life, your life, right, is part of the Bible. Your life is part of the Bible. For Ruth and Naomi, this was just everyday life. They did not see David, King David, coming through their line. They did not see Christ being birthed through that line. They did not see the big picture of God working something. To them, it was just like, it's just little old me doing my little thing. And so like, you know, when you get to that place where like your little insignificant part of your life in 2020, dealing with COVID-19 and the riots and everything that's happening around the world, it's just you doing your life, but you are part of a pivotal aspect of God's larger plan. And he's writing something, and your part of your story is a beautiful part of that. You know, the interconnection is crazy, right? You know, and maybe you don't get a full book, you know, but maybe you were the innkeeper at the motel that they stayed at for the night where they had the major discussion, and that was your part. I don't know, but you know, so what Naomi chooses to do right here at this pivotal point is very, very crucial. And I think it's crucial because what you and I do when God's getting ready to move us from being wrecked to recovery, to the wholeness, to fulfillment of his promise, is super important. We have two choices, and these two choices literally will either, what you do with these choices will either allow God to fully manifest his plan in your life, or you arrest his plan and you tie him up. So we block God's work of recovery when we choose to let what happened to you define you.
Yeah.
When you allow your incidents to become your identity. How have, if we're going to be open, how have we allowed in our life incidents to shape identity?
Yeah.
This is going to go so many different routes.
Yeah.
Let's go there.
Because I know Jason probably has experiences that are so different than mine. Ryan probably has so many different than mine. Mine, what's funny is when we talked about this, like, I instantly go back to, it's like super, like, deep, and I don't know, like, if it needs to get there, but abuse victims, like, any type of abuse victims.
Sure.
Which I am one. So that, like, when you read that, that's where it hits. It's like, I cannot let that define me now. I learned a lesson from it, even being a victim, like now having kids and stuff, that's the first place I went with that. I can't let it define me. Yeah. And I have to, I've been through therapy and talked to lots of people. I have to look at it like a learning lesson. Mm-hmm. And I can't keep going back and saying, I'm a victim. Oh, well, it was me. Yeah. I was physically abused, mentally abused, sexually abused, whatever. Mm-hmm. But what I took from it is whatever happened. And now what do I do with it? Do I play the victim? Do I become the mom I am now? Mm-hmm. Do I become the wife I am now? The person I am now? Which I didn't let it hold me back. I just said, you know what? It happened. I learned, move on. And it's crazy because I have told this to people, even like in some of my women's groups that I was in. A lot of people didn't agree with it, but it's hard to say, but I'm thankful because it did make me the person I am today.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. If it didn't happen, like what kind of human being would I be? And if it didn't happen, like what kind of mom would I be to my kids? You know what I mean? So, and I know that I was never mad at God for what happened to me because I know that there's a reason. There's always a reason. There's a plan. And whatever it was, I have to trust that it was for good somehow. Mm-hmm. And some people looked at it like it was morbid to say that, but
it's not normal.
No, it's not, but neither am I. So
no, I mean, like literally,
society normal. Sure,
yeah.
Society normal.
Sure.
It's like no,
spiritually, it's a different level.
When
you're
at
a different level, yeah,
right,
you're at a much different level.
But I have to, because then how miserable would I be if I was just like, "What was me? God, why did you do this to me? Why did you let this happen to me?"
True.
You know what I mean? Instead of like, "Okay, God, there was a reason why you did this. Mm-hmm. I trust you, and I have to stay faithful to that." I guess
Well, let's peel back some layers because as believers, as Christians, I think it's oftentimes that we speak from the place of like, in the aftermath, I see that God was at work all along.
Yeah.
And we sometimes can't be real about how, when we were in that moment, how the allowing the incidents to shape our identity created 10 years or 15 years. How many years did a false sense of identity break you? How many relationships did you break? How many opportunities did you mess up simply because you were self-sabotaging because you weren't good enough, you weren't this enough, you were molested, you were this. I mean, it's like, they did this to you, and so you start shaping every single person that you meet in your life as someone who's going to do that, and so you kind of almost play the role that, like, I'm supposed to be this person because this is how it works for me. I don't know if that's like, translating.
Yes. I will pick up right there. I have so many, applicable areas to this conversation. But just on what you said right there, I remember literally I was going to a school in Watts, California. Anybody ever heard of Watts? Okay. Charles Drew, Compton Ave, and Firestone.
South Central.
You know. But it was interesting. It was a predominantly African American area, and also Mexican American. But most of our teachers were white. And I remember it was a teacher who, I don't know, she would always just point me out in the class with negativity, and she would always say things. And this is in light of everything that's been going on in society as well. But she'd always say, "Why do you look so angry? Why do you look so angry?" And I'm like, "I'm not angry. I'm fine. I'm not angry. I'm not angry." And I remember just telling my mom, and my mom was like, "I'm going to switch you out of her class." Da, da, da. My mom detected certain things as well, and I remember as a kid, I just began to act angry in her class. Now she would say it for weeks, and then I just started being disruptive. I started to pick fights with people and different things like that. And I remember it was one black teacher. You had those teachers you never forget because they just are so instrumental in your life. Like, I really can cry thinking about this dude. But he was just speaking to me. He was like, I know that the lady, the teacher, Miss Griffin, nobody will know who she is. I know that she always says you're angry, but keep your head up. Don't be who she says you are. Be who you are, But I was beginning to just get into this character of, yeah, you're right. I am angry, and that literally stuck with me throughout my school years of battling with, am I the angry black man, because I am a black man? And I don't know. I feel like through Jesus, he's allowed me to experience the joy. And now everybody knows me as the guy who smiles, the guy who has a big smile, because that is the true me. Right. And a lot of times we battle with the false counterfeit version of ourselves rather than the true authentic version of ourselves through Christ. And that's why Jesus is our only hope in this time in regards to race, in regards to economic status, and whatever it may be. Right. Jesus literally is the only hope, because he's the only one that can bring you out of the false you. Right. Mm-hmm. He's the only one that can bring you out of, like Naomi, they saw all of these things that she had to be grateful about. Right. But she was carrying this baggage that tainted her vision, clouded her vision, made it blurry. So now I can't be thankful, even though they all see that I have reason to be. Yeah. I have to be what this thing says I should be. Right. And I stopped there. But yeah, it's definitely something I think is just common to humanity. Right. Things we are sticky. Right. We allow things to stick to us rather than peel off of us. Mm-hmm.
In thinking about this, I think when incidences and things come up, there's sort of you look at God-caused incidences, you look at incidences caused by others, and then you look at instances caused by yourself. And the things that we tend to stick and hold on to the most in a negative fashion are the ones that aren't even in our control. Yeah. And it's such an interesting thing to look at your life and go, I'm blaming God for X, Y, Z, when God technically had no role in it. Or you blame my mom was this sort of way or my dad was this sort of way, so now I'm this kind of way. Right. From my childhood, I had no control over that. Sure. Yeah. It's rare that people say, due to my personal decisions, I'm in this battle I'm going through. Right. It's typically, God caused my pain. Right. God is to blame. I'm going to walk away from God because God is the one who caused my punishment. Mm-hmm. Right. God punished me and caused my name to be changed. Call me this. Right. And so, or it's like my mother was this way, my parents, my society, et cetera, right? The angry, right? Your teacher. Yes. And so we hold on to what others deem us to be. And the sad part is when we become what we've been told versus wait in who we are and have already been declared to be by God and stay in that position through it all, not listening to the voices, because the voices who try to identify you as somebody else are coming from their own broken spiritual place. Right. And so you take on an identity from somebody else's broken spiritual place, and now we have two broken spirits declaring pain from God. When we're just hurting each other. And so we hold on a lot to the God-caused and others-caused incidences, and not necessarily the onus of like where we personally have made the decisions. Yeah. And I hold on to a ton from my childhood, right? Growing up in Mormon religion, growing up in a family of achievements and trophies, and have to earn it. I had to fight for love, and I had to earn love in certain ways. I had to earn it through sports. I had to earn it through grades. Like it was just a constant battle to earn love, and I held on to that until I sat down, similar to you, and said, God, do I have to keep fighting? And God says, you never had to fight all along. Come on now. Right? So God says, you never had to earn a trophy all along. You never actually had to have the grades all along. You listened to somebody else's incident and pain, took it on yourself when you actually had no onus of it.
It's very interesting, because I think that now more than ever, the world needs to realize that the gospel is simply God's desire to change your identity. That's it. Amen. In every religion that's known to mankind, it's you go to heaven or hell or paradise, whatever it is that is in your different contexts, based on what you do. But Christianity is you get to be with God because of who He makes you to become. Sure. The identity that He shifts and He gives you that's found in Him. And so, Jesus literally died for our identity to take us from a place of broken, incidental identities that we shape because of things that have happened to us. And he takes that and says, no, this didn't happen to you. It happened for you so I could form you into this new person I'm creating, you know? And so, you know, we block God when we decide to choose that what happened to us is who we are. The incidents are our identity, and you can't control what happens to you, but you can control your response to what happened to you.
Yes.
You can control your response to it. You can control how you let what happens to you shape your worldview. You know, right now we're in the fight for worldviews. That's and it's worldviews that are people are clamoring for identities. I am a Democrat. I am a far left. I am a right wing. This. I am a libertarian. I am a BLM supporter. I am not that. I am whatever it is. Everyone's trying to find an identity in some cause, and God's like, no, it's not about any of those things. It's about who I want to make you to become. So, an idea I'll throw out to you is that, like, you know, sometimes you can be a victim simply because you take on a victim's mentality.
Oh, totally.
At this point, Naomi is no longer a victim.
Sure.
She's returned back to Bethlehem, but by her declaring to everyone around her, don't call me Naomi, which means pleasant, call me Mara, which means bitter. And so I want you to identify with how I have had pain in my life more than this next chapter that's about to be written, you know? And so, you know, it's hard to, like, you know, get our minds around the fact that our past trauma is not who we are now.
Sure.
Unless we respond to it that way, you know? So I'll throw this out there to you guys. And to those of you who are listening or watching, how have you allowed your past trauma to define you? And how did that serve you?
Oh, God.
How did that serve you? Like, what were the benefits of creating an identity around trauma?
Yeah. Here are the benefits of creating an identity behind trauma. So when I talked about earlier, like coming out of this 3-year season, you know, of things circumstantially not going the way my wife and I anticipated for them to go, right? There was an inward thing that took place, and that inward thing was we were Naomi. We were holding on to, you know, all of the things that did not go right, and then it became our identity. And then I literally, this is what God has been revealing to me lately. Like, I've literally been passing up on opportunities because I've been stuck in depression. I've been passing up on things, doors that God was opening, neglecting from walking through those doors because of my identification with the circumstance. And the pinnacle of that, and this is how God can use, you know, our misunderstanding, our misconceptions. This is how he can use that for his glory to bring us from, as you said, from wreck to recovery. The pinnacle of that was a couple of weeks ago, just been working from home during this whole COVID-19 craziness, you know, and things have circumstantially begin to go better. Right. But psychologically, I've been stuck in this place of, but they're going to get bad again. Yeah. You know how your life is.
Right.
They're going to get bad again. Just stuck in this place, trapped in this place. And that's one of the things I've been learning. Depression keeps you trapped in the past, while anxiety keeps you with a fear of the future. Right. And neither of those put you in the present.
Right.
Jeez, yeah.
So the pinnacle of that was a couple of weeks ago, just one night, like been having like health issues, like, you know, acid reflux, like minor things, right? And I swallowed some food and I felt like I was about to choke. And then I began to have a panic attack. And it was like the worst panic attack of my life, to where all I saw in that moment was death. That's all I saw. And I called my wife, just like, Reach, I can't breathe. Just like an extreme panic attack. And she ended up calling 911. Then they ended up taking me to the emergency room. and the doctor was so calm, like Mo, like just so unemotional, unmoved. He was like, "You're fine. Nothing's wrong." I'm like, help me. I'm crying out. And the only thing in my mind is, you about to go.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Just kiss. Everything is done. Like your life is ending tonight. And that's all that was there. They ended up letting me go, medication, the whole nine. And 7 days straight after that, every night I had a panic attack.
Oh, wow.
And felt like I was about to die. And it wasn't until like I was texting everybody to pray for me, and all of that. And I got on the phone with Pastor Richard and he began to ask me these questions, like, spiritual questions. And he was just calling my spirit, man. It was going out of this place of the natural, out of this place of my sinful nature that I was resting in, and into a spiritual place to where Jesus says, when Nicodemus says, how can a man go back in a mother's womb and be born again? Right. He says, you being a teacher of the law, you don't know? Right. It's a spiritual rebirth. Right. It's something that we can't see with the human eye. Right. And that took place with me that as I was on the phone with Pastor Richard, and I literally felt God saying, you have a choice. You can continue to live in this fear. Right. You can continue to allow this to torment you every night, or you can be free right now. Right. You could be free right now. And from that day, which was May 17th, around 3 p.m., from that day, I've been walking in freedom. Right. I've been walking in freedom because I begin to detach myself from what happened. Detach myself from the past. And ever since then, God has been showing me so much that I missed out on, but he's also been showing me so much that I can take hold of now because I'm free from that thing.
Every person who does not want to believe in the supernatural nature of what God does to our spirit, we will explain it away and say, it doesn't work that way for everyone. Yeah. You can wait your entire lifetime for one moment of healing. Healing, it's something that happens in a moment. Now, here's what's going to happen is that once you have that and you have an awareness that can speak from God's identity and what he's done, when the incidents show up, because they will show up again, the things that trigger the past, the things that like remind you of where you're coming from, they will show up again. Yeah. But now you can speak to them from a place of, no, that's not who I am right now. Yes. This is who God has made me to be. This is how he's fixed it. This is how he's reshaped and restored and reconciled all things in me. Yeah. And your identity now can inform the incidents, as opposed to the incidents informing who you are. Yes. So it's a momentary thing. It's in an instant. Yeah. In a snap. Yeah. God changes everything. You still live life on this planet. Yeah. But now, if you always remember, go back to what did he do to you? What has he done? How has he dealt with that issue? That's like, trying to hold you down. The devil, if I can call him that, right? Yeah. The enemy, the devil is one who will never, ever, how do I say this? His number one tactic is to never bring you anticipation about the future, but to remind you of things that bring anxiety from the past. Yes. Anxiety never looks forward. Anxiety is always looking backwards. What happened back then is going to happen again. It's going to happen again, So next choice, if I can move on. The next choice that we get to make that can arrest God's plan of wholeness and healing and recovery in our life is when you choose to blame circumstances that you can't control or understand. When you choose to blame circumstances that you can't control or understand to give you a perspective, to justify your perspective as to why you're going to shape this incidental identity based on the bitter past and the bad things that have happened to you. Naomi, in verse 21, I'll read it to you, tries to do that. So watch what she says. She says, I went out full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi? Since the Lord has witnessed against me. In some versions, it says that he has wielded his arrows of wrath against me. And the Almighty has afflicted me. Now watch this. You were talking about blaming God.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned that, right? Yeah. So here she is. She's saying, don't call me pleasant. Don't say that I have a future or hope and anything like that. When my history shows that God judged me, he cursed me. He's like, this is the plight of my family. This is it. There's no redemption in this whole thing. Don't say that. God's not for me. You know, I think a lot of us sometimes can be in a worship service and hear someone say something good and declare God's goodness, and you're just kind of like, hey, amen. That's for other people, not me. Yeah. I know what my life is like. I won't get too excited, Monique. I won't get too excited. I know how this. I'm not going to put my hopes up. I'm not going to build up, any hope. And the thing about it is that like her statement is like completely off. Her and her family left Bethlehem because they were empty. They were hungry. They left because of a famine. They went somewhere else to be filled. Yeah. And here she's saying, I left empty. Like, oh, wow. Is that so, Naomi, Miss Naomi? Did you really leave empty, or did you leave because, you weren't full when you left? And so that's not true. And I think that we do that all the time. We try to justify our way of thinking. We have selective memory. We will pick and choose things that ignore, our responsibility or how God was blessing in that moment. We'll only pick out and amplify the things that justify our perspective. Yeah. We will bend the truth to emphasize our point of view. We will do what we do on Facebook. Can we go there?
Yeah.
We will do what we do on Facebook. We will copy and paste articles and memes that justify our positions and become Facebook scholars and social media PhDs, experts on our point of view and our perspective.
Sure.
She didn't leave full. She left hungry, and she comes back because she's heard that God has visited his people again, and there's bread in the house of bread in Bethlehem. She comes back because she wants to be full again. She comes back because there's a glimmer of hope. Yeah. But that glimmer of hope is being snuffed out by her clinging to this identity of bitterness. Like if you look at her life at this time, she has a new daughter. She has someone who's pledged loyalty to her. Yeah. She has a friend, really like someone who's like, I'm going to be with you no matter what. I'm going to forsake the possibilities of prosperity in Moab in order to cling to you. Yeah. And what does she do? She does what we do. She blames God. And I want to say that blaming God is normal. Sure. If you've ever blamed God and felt guilty about it, you're in good company, because we all do it, right? She puts the blame on God, and what I'll say is this: is that just because God knows what will happen does not mean that He caused it. The second part of it, and I would love to hear you guys' response to this: just because God knows the bad things that are going to happen in your life does not mean that He caused it. Number two, it doesn't mean that He will stop it. What kind of a God is that won't stop the bad things?
Listening to a lot of what you share in these stories is that I think today what I've noticed, and within myself as well, is that people find far too much pride and attention by being in the negative process than allowing the healing to be the end of the story. So too often people say, well, I'm going through a journey, I'm going through this pain, God's putting me through this, and we attach to this as I understand, and we give it attention, and people get lifted up by it, and people are in this painful process, and it becomes some sort of indicative like righteousness to say that you're holding on to so much pain, right? You're holding on, you're sticking to this. When the craziest thing is the only reason we give that so much attention is because it's comfortable to what we know.
Right.
And when someone goes all the way through the healing and somebody goes all the way through to the healing moment, we say, good for them. Yeah. But let's go back and give attention to everyone who says they're struggling and they hate God and they hurt everybody.
Yeah.
because it's so rare for us to even fathom that we could be the one at the end of the story. Right.
Yeah.
So we sit in the circle of victims, right? And we just look at each other and go, yep, me too. Yep, me too. I'm in pain too. We're all in the struggle together. We all just are hurting, right? But we don't actually get to the point of healing because we want to sit in the comfortability of sitting around the victims and saying, me too.
Right.
Right? Like we all just sort of resonate with this like theory of, oh my gosh, well, I'm a victim, and please don't call me delivered. Please don't call me full. Please don't call me blessed. Please don't call me returning as a glorious situation. Please call me negative because the rest of you will understand that I'm hurt and I'm negative. So now you will resonate with me. As opposed to say, I'm actually full. I'm blessed. I have a child. I have loyalty, etc. We actually push those people away in the church. And we cling to the negative.
Right.
We cling to the ones that are like, I hate God, I'm struggling. Oh, me too. Oh my gosh, that's just our journey.
Right.
That's just the journey. Like, yeah, we all just hate God. Let's sit right here.
Right.
As opposed to the people who actually declare the fullness and reach through it and identify with that. It's almost this weird badge.
Right.
Sure.
Those people are exhausting.
Why? Tell us.
But he just laid it all out. That's why it's so exhausting listening to people who are like, oh, I can't do, I had this happen to me and then this and that. Oh my gosh. I'm like, shut up. Just what is good? For the love of everything, can you find something good in that situation? I don't care how you find it, but just shut up and find it.
Right.
Like, stop with the negativity. We get it. It happened. Now, what is good of it? Okay, so this happened, but on the bright side, this new situation has become of it, or whatever. You know what I mean? Find something good. Isn't that crazy that I'm the one that has to do that? Right?
Motivational Mo.
Let's not get ahead of myself.
Motivation with Mo.
It's the mo and motivation.
She puts the Mo in motivation.
But because I'm not really a Debbie Downer, but I'm also not like super hyper either.
Right.
Yeah.
But I do like people to find the good in whatever situation you're in. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because, like, not to get super political, but I will, because we're all political one way or the other.
Yeah.
And we see the news cycle. Something, one of the worst tragedies that's happened in the history of America is September 11.
Oh, yeah.
But on September 11, the news media discovered something on that day also that changed the way news is reported. They discovered that bad news creates eyeballs.
Oh, yeah.
People want to watch tragedy, and that keeps the eyeballs and the cycle of the news. Yeah. So the shift was that they started reporting more and chasing stories that could polarize the nation and make people clamor towards the bad news. So whether you're on the left or the right, they knew what scared you enough to keep your eyeballs coming. Yeah. And, you know, you said Me Too. Someone said, I think it was you, talking about Me Too. You know, the Me Too movement, which was a very powerful voice in speaking to some of the realities that women have faced. You know, if I can borrow from that, cosmically, biblically, eternally, believers are the greatest group of the Me Too movement. In that, we now can say we overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. We all have a story and a narrative of how things were done to us, but Christ did something to restore that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so you can sit at the table and say, maybe it wasn't the same as what I went through. Maybe I didn't have Miss Griffin, I had Miss
Yeah.
You know, I don't know who your abuser was, but I know the name of my abuser. You know, we all can look around and say there's not a single person on this planet that has experienced something that is unique to them only.
Right.
So true.
The Bible says that there's no temptation that has captured you, overtaken you, except that which is common to man. Yeah. Your struggle is not special.
No, it's not.
The only thing that's special is that God is, I feel like preaching right now, that God is faithful, right? That's the only thing that's the only thing that's special. God is faithful, and with the trial provides a way of escape so that we may all endure. We all endure stuff, right? And so here's Naomi, and what I want to say is this, is that our perspective is always limited to our experience. Our perspective will always be limited to our experience, whereas God's perspective about our experience is not limited to our experience. Yeah. It's unlimited to everyone else's experience. And so your pain becomes a puzzle piece to my redemption and my restoration. Because 2 Corinthians says that we are comforted by the same comfort that comforted us. So what you went through with Miss Griffin comforts my Miss Crapsey, you know what I'm saying? And his perspective is unlimited to everyone's experience at all times. It's past, present, and future. Naomi thinks that life has happened to her. But God's like, this has happened for you and for the fulfillment of what I'm about to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to give away everything that's about to take place here. God's perspective is infinite. Ours is always going to be finite. And so we just don't see it on this side of heaven. You know.
I think what Mo was saying was really fascinating. I don't think people find the puzzle piece of their comfort by saying, I had a bad teacher for my identity, and I had a bad teacher for my identity. There's no puzzle piece of comfort there.
Right.
If he says I had a bad teacher for my identity, and someone else says I had a bad teacher for my identity, but here's how it shaped my future and where I took control.
Right.
Yeah.
Now I have a puzzle piece inside of his heart.
Right.
Yeah.
Too often we have two victims speaking to two victims and then going, oh, you suffered too, and so did I. And then we walk out the door and
Let's
we
stay
just
here.
continue living with shame and
Right.
pain, right?
Yeah.
So until people allow...
And you form a culture and an identity,
it's a trauma culture.
a tribe around that trauma.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. In which the comfort is in declaring the trauma, not declaring the lesson coming out of it.
Oh, totally.
So now we sit in these tribes of trauma-filled as opposed to trauma-filled, and a healer steps out of the group, right?
Yeah.
You need somebody to say there's a bigger purpose for what happened, whether it's a total truck, whether it's identity of a teacher, whether it was my childhood struggles, whatever it may be. Right. Somebody's got to go out and stop arresting God. Back to your points, right?
Yes.
Somebody's got to stop arresting God and go through it and wait through it till you hit the moment of healing so that I can now turn my chair to the right and turn my chair to the left and say, guess what? Here's the purpose of what I experienced from similar trauma.
Right. Sure.
And now people go, my goodness, how have I not felt there's hope in the journey?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I think is that everyone wants to be happy. And happiness sometimes is defined by us being able to understand why things happened a certain way.
Yeah.
You know, if I can understand why every detail worked out this way, then I'll find fulfillment. And the way that our spirit works, the way that God works, is that he does not require you to invest your life trying to discover why, but rather discovering what is next.
Sure.
What is next? Because we're never going to understand the why of anything, of what happened. I tell you right now, Naomi and Ruth, from beginning to end of this book, they never are given why things happen to them. We know why. 5,000 years later, we understand the reason why Ruth's story is so important. We understand why God allowed them to go to Moab and for why Elimelech had died and why the two sons died and why they had to come back. We understand why Boaz was in that field at that time. We understand that none of it was like, it just so happened this way. But rather, you know, God was allowing those steps to be ordered a certain way because he was about to do something. You know, we have to give up the need to know why, because given enough time, God will take you from wrecked to recovery. All we have to do is wait for that recovery and trust God for his timing and his wisdom for all the seasons in our life. All the seasons in our life. She's had 10, 15 years of a bad season. But I want you to see how this chapter closes out. She says, I went out full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has witnessed against me and the Almighty has afflicted me? That is her doctrine. That is her sermon. That is her testimony right there. Yeah. That is her testimony. Mm-hmm. That is what she's clinging to. That is like, my identity is no longer Naomi. It is Mara. God has judged me. This is horrible. I have no hope whatsoever. But if we trust God for his wisdom and his timing, then we can understand the next verse. So Naomi returned with her Ruth the Moabite and her daughter-in-law, who returned from the land of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. I like how, I think it's English Standard Version says, I'm going to look it up in the English Standard Version if you don't mind, because there's some key language that is used for verse 22. If you have your Bible app, just go ahead and turn there with me right now real quick. Because I think it's very important. I think it's the ESV that renders it this way. I think it's very important. Maybe it's New Living Translation. But in one translation, it literally says they came back. It was springtime. It was springtime, the beginning of the harvest, the barley harvest. And I think it's very important that we take note of that, because what's happening there is this. It's NLT, right? Can you read that?
NLT says, so Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by her daughter-in-law Ruth, the young Moabite woman. They arrived in Bethlehem in late spring at the beginning of the barley harvest.
I love the way it puts it that way. They came in late spring. Yeah. Oh, come on, back in church, he was like, your spring didn't come too early. It was late spring. The season was shifting, and it was the beginning of the harvest.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
What if your greatest the greatest move of God is just about to happen, but you're blocking it because you're sticking and holding on to an identity that's based on incidents that were preparing you for a harvest, but you don't want the harvest because you'd rather be called bitter.
Yeah.
You'd rather say God has judged me. Yeah. When God's getting ready to, this harvest was the greatest harvest that was going to ever happen to her in her life. It was going to repay and restore and do everything. And you see it over and over in Scripture. Job loses everything, but then God creates another harvest where he receives double what he lost. It's all throughout Scripture. So the choice that we get to make here is, are we going to trust God for his wisdom and his timing for every season of our life? Or are we going to cling to an identity that's based on incidents of what happened to us? The prophet Joel, he has this prophecy. The Lord says throughout Joel, he says, I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. You will have plenty to eat until you're full, and you will praise the name of the Lord. Now, the thing about us is that we don't come from an agricultural society that understands that. My dad one time was telling me a story about when he was growing up. They had a situation where the locusts came and destroyed all the crops. Oh, wow. When the locusts come and destroy all the crops, it's not that you have a bad harvest that season. It's something that can last 4 years because they destroy everything. The soil has to be redone. Everything has to be redone. It's starting all over again. And so the restoration that he's talking about here is that I'll restore it literally says, I'll repay you for the years that the locusts destroyed. They destroyed it in one blow. It was destroyed, but it took years of recovery. And he says, I'll repay you for all that. Yeah. So I just want to encourage you to know that as you are traveling through life, as you're trying to figure out this whole thing, do not allow the incidents to shape the identity that God has for you. Do not allow it. Do not allow the things that have happened to you, the things that have been projected on you. You're an angry boy.
Yeah. You're an angry boy.
Yeah.
You know, you're this, you're that. Your people are coming from this situation, and so you take that on as a cloak, as a badge of honor. But the moment that, oh man, I feel like preaching right now. The moment that Bartimaeus heard that the teacher was calling for him, he took that cloak and says, "This is never going to define me again. I'm about to go and receive my wholeness." So who has God called you to be? What has he called you to? May that inform every incident that's happening in your life. May that be the standard by which you judge things. You know, and there's just so much that is in this word. But as we close, any lasting thoughts, any closing thoughts you guys have before we go to wrap this up?